back in Home Depot. Haven't been in touch with the real world since a couple of few videos ago. Don't know what's going on, haven't been in touch with anybody. So the updates will be when I'm back from fishing this go. I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of them. A whole bunch of updates, we'll see what happens. So in the meantime, listen to this. Mark this as read. Bigfoot grabbed me when I was 11 in Minnesota. Holy shit. Hi Steve, my name is Tommy Eugene and you are welcome to use my name. I want to quickly express my gratitude to you for your incredible efforts and hard work to help people like me find a voice and strength to finally speak up and speak up. No problem. Giver. We're here. This is a long story, but I feel you will find it worth the reading, as I had several up-close encounters with the Sasquatch when I was a boy, including being grabbed and walked out of the swamp. And the emotional damage it caused me has been both lifelong and crippling. That is very, very unfortunate. But after listening to you on a daily basis for well over 2 years, and the encounter stories you're sharing with us, I found the strength to rise up and overcome the PTSD and depression that has destroyed most of my life. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate and respect what you're doing and who you stand for. Okay, enough sucking up. I'll get on with my encounter. You know what? It's only because of you. Okay? It's only because of you that we're all here and people like you. All right? Thank you for the kind words, and I'm so glad you found the place. But it really does sadden me that you lost that amount of time. Let's hear it. I'm a self-indoctrinated member of the Round Table. I'm one of the thousands that I believe you created this forum for. But my life is short on this earth, as I am last stage COPD. I'm a disabled U.S. Navy vet, and my lungs are shot from my service to this country. Work in the bottoms of naval vessels unknowingly filled with asbestos. That sucks dick. I hope to God they give you some kind of compensation for that. Please accept my deep condolences for the loss of your buddy, Mr. Macaroni. He obviously shared a very special part of your life and your adventures. You two will meet again on a sunny, hot day. On a sunny day, I hope we will. It took me over 45 years to finally be able to speak of this. Steve, when I was a boy of about 11, I was grabbed by a large female Sasquatch and walked out of a swamp in northern Minnesota. I sent this to you over a year ago, and I had refrained from resending this simply because you said you were getting so many emails you couldn't keep up. So, how's it feel to be famous? LOL. That's not me. But, shit, my health is pretty bad now, and I'm feeling a sense of urgency. So it's now or never. The encounters happened in '73, and I was 11. I was born and raised in a small northern suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm number 6 in a family of 12 because I was a runaway, escaping abuse at home. I was sent by country juvenile court to a foster home on a farm about 15 miles west of the small farming town of Willow River in northern Minnesota. By the way, David Politis has identified 2 hot spots of missing people in Minnesota. This area is one of them. Steve, I believe this little bit of information about Don and the abuse and torture I endured from him on this farm is important to the encounter, as I think it possibly explains the Sasquatch's behavior and handling of me. I believe these creatures were watching the farm from the surrounding forest for a long time. The farm was run by a sadistic, child-abusing asshole who tortured me and his farm animals on a daily basis. I won't go into details about the abuse or torture in this email, but to say it was horrific would be putting it mildly. Let me interrupt for 1 second. I know somebody who has gone through absolute hell in their lifetime, from absolute abusive parents, step-parents, got dumped into the foster thing, and was repeatedly raped in numerous foster homes. So, if any of you have any knowledge of any foster homes or animals that are there, turn them in. All right? Turn them in. Or go get them. On to the story. I'm going to share my third and most crazy encounter first, and if you want to hear about the other 2, let me know. The day of the encounter went like this. I don't know what Dan did with the bloody mess in the sheep shed after I stormed out of the barn that day, but I do know what I did. If If you want to picture Dan, think of Clint Eastwood in the movie Gran Torino. Same exact age, identical look, pissy attitude, and more violent. I ran up the driveway and started running down the dirt road in my duck boots. I could not get the red blood images out of my head, and I cried all the way up the road. You see, we got attached to the calves like they were our pets. Unlike the cows, they were little and cute. We named them, and they followed us around like puppies. We fed them with sucker buckets and cared for them every day and played with them. It was a total shock for a boy to see them getting ripped apart and eaten alive by filthy, screaming pigs. I started running away whenever Don abused me. When I first started to run away from him, he would catch me right away because I didn't know where I was, where to go, or how to get away. So I always just ran up the long driveway and then down the middle of the dry gravel road until he would figure out I was missing and inevitably come after me. Either on Thunder the Horse or with his rusty old 67 Ford LTD that had no muffler and smelled like a cow pee inside. I could hear his car coming down the gravel road after me from a long ways away, but I usually didn't go off the road and hide. I just ran on the road until he pulled up next to me and slammed on the brakes. He would come flying out of his car, swearing and yelling at me, and he'd go directly into his trunk and bring out a 10-foot length of hemp rope, tie the rope around my wrists and the other end to his trailer hitch, all the while yelling and swearing at me. Then he would drive me back. He would be in his car with his head hanging out the window, yelling back at me, saying things like, "You think you're so smart? You don't know shit, you dumb son of a bitch. You like running away, eh? How you liking that running now?" And he speed up the car a little more, from a walking pace to a jogging pace. I was pretty tired by the time he caught up to me a couple of miles down the gravel road from the farm, so I couldn't keep up running behind for very long. I'd eventually fall and start screaming, but he would stop, and he would drag me the rest of the way back to the farm down the gravel road. That damn gravel left more cuts and bruises on me than I thought possible, and I would be sore for a week. And even now at 62, my back and legs still bear the scars. This is killing me. Killing me. Anyways, as soon as I had healed up some, the whippings and beatings and torture would begin again. I'd made a plan in my head. Next time I was going to run off the road, cross the swamp, and get into the woods. But I was afraid of the woods and the swamps that were on both sides of the road. I would guess there was about 40 yards of swamp, maybe more in places, that ran up to the thick woods. I didn't like swamps or woods around Don's place. I was always super cautious. I know now why I was so afraid of the swamp, and it's because I'd heard loud howls and whoops, breaking tree branches, and strange noises that I couldn't explain whenever I was near the woods or running along the same area on the road. There was something weird going on in there. I heard it, I sensed it, I felt it, and I was afraid. But this time, I tried to ignore the noises and feelings, assuming it was just the unknown local wildlife as I jumped down into the wet ditch when I heard his car coming up the road about a mile back behind me. I was right there on the area of the road where the noises always came from in the woods, but I didn't care. I had to go now, or he would see me and capture me. Probably make me clean up all the blood in the sheep shed. Oh God, I can't go back there. On this road, there were no other farms or houses. It was very desolate, just heavy wooded forests with a 40-yard strip of swamp on both sides of the 5-mile gravel road. So I jumped off the right side of the road and down into the swamp, and I started heading across the swamp, hoping to cross it to the tree line and into the forest that is beyond the swamp. There's a state forest, and it extends for many, many miles in all directions. I knew I was going to be soaking wet by the time I got over to the woods, but it would be worth it to get away from them. The waters kept getting deeper and muckier with every step I take, and I'm panicking and struggling to get through the swamp before Don's car gets to where I am. My feet are sinking and sticking in the muck, and I'm struggling every step to get my feet out with my boots on. I'm wearing those tall green rubber duck boots that farmers wear. I quickly realizing that it's too deep, and I'm not going to be able to cross this swamp to the tree line beyond it. The water is higher than my boots now. The mosquitoes and deer flies are thick as hell in here, and I'm getting eaten up. Don's car comes. I duck by the cattails, and his car slowly goes by. He didn't notice me about 15 yards out in this swampy area, so I've avoided him for the moment, but I know he'll turn around at the highway about 5 miles up and come back like he always does. Now I'm stuck in the swamp and struggling to keep my boots on, and it's getting deep. It's up to my chest now, and I wonder how I'll keep my head aloof if it gets any deeper, and if I will even make it into the woods. I'm panicking and I'm sinking. My feet are stuck in the muck up to my knees. My boots are full of muck. The water above the muck is up to my chest. The more I struggle, the more I sink into the swamp muck. I'm pulling at cattails and reeds. I'm screaming and crying out loud, wishing Dawn had seen me because a beating is better than drowning. I realize that I'm all alone and that no one would even know I was in this swamp. Now I'm really freaking out. And as my screams get louder, my panic increases. I get a few more struggled steps, and now I'm up to my neck. I'm crying loud now, and the swamp water is in my eyes and in my mouth. All of a sudden, from the woods, I hear the sound of branches and trees breaking, and something heavy stomping through the forest. Crash, 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 then splash. I look up, expecting to see a bear or something, because it sounded like I heard a buffalo was blasting through the trees. About 30 feet away from me, on the edge of the swamp, is a... What am I seeing? It's a monster. It's at least 9 or 10 feet tall, and it is massive. It's huge. I've seen a lot of monster movies, and this is a monster. It's just standing there breathing hard and looking at me. I notice right away, whatever it is, it's a female because of the large hairy breasts. Weird how an 11-year-old beginning puberty will notice breasts even on a monster. But breasts or not, it is a huge, hairy monster, and I am screaming and struggling, and I'm sucking in swamp water and choking, and I know I'm going to drown. I stop struggling in the direction going away from the road and turn away from the monster and start struggling back towards the road, but I can't get my boots loose of the muck. After pulling so hard, I was seeing stars. I was finally able to pull both my feet out of my muck-filled duck boots one at a time and get a few more steps as this huge, brown, hairy monster starts coming straight towards me. Then I realized my mistake. Without the boots to somewhat support my feet in the muck, my tiny, slippery little feet slide even farther into the muck under the water with the weight of my body, and I'm up past my mouth in the water, and I'm dizzy from struggling, and I'm screaming and panicking. I have stars spinning around inside my head, my lungs are burning, and I'm choking on the swamp water in my mouth. This monster is almost on top of me now, but it never made a noise, no growling, no roaring, nothing. It seemed to glide when it walked, effortlessly through the swamp towards me. The swamp water seemed only to come to its knees, and as it got to within about 5 feet of me, I thought for sure it was going to just rip me apart or kill me and take me to its babies for dinner, but it did not. I was cowered down with my hands and arms over my head and my face in the water as the shadow of this beast surrounded me. All of a sudden, even through the water, I'm overwhelmed by this terrible stink, like a box of long dead skunks mixed with dog poop, ammonia, and barf on top of it all. The worst thing I've ever smelled, ever. My father owned a garbage company when I was a boy, and trust me, I've smelled the worst things you can smell, and this beast smelled worse than the worst thing I've ever smelled. And that's saying a lot. Then everything got silent. The creature was standing over the top of me, just staring at me. I was face down in the swamp with my hands over my head and my eyes closed tightly, crying and coughing and spitting up swamp water. Then I heard this beast make a long exhale, like a sigh, like it felt compassion or had a moment of weakness or something. Hard to explain the emotion, but we both just froze for a moment, except for my choking. The swamp was completely silent. Everything was silent, like someone plugged my ears. It was like this beast woman was trying to decide what to do with me. It had the appearance of a wild animal, a monster, but its eyes had an intelligence to them, dare I say like human. In that moment, I realized she was so much more than just a wild animal. It took another slow step closer to me, and I felt its cold, wet, mucky, hairy hand slowly grab the back of my jacket and my neck and pull me straight up out of the swamp. Gosh, it was strong. It had long hair. When it grabbed my jacket at the back of my neck, it got some of my hair in its fist, and it was ripping the hair out of the back of my neck. I'm swinging my little fists above and behind my head, hitting this beast on his forearm, but it was like hitting a log with hair on it. It was so rock hard and muscular. I've never been so afraid of anything in my young life. Not Don or any of the other monsters. This monster scared me so bad, I started peeing my pants. And as I felt the warmness of my urine running down my leg and my wet jeans, I started kicking and flailing my feet and twisting my body around to get loose, but it had me tight in its strong grip. Its fist was bigger than my whole head. The more I struggled, the more my hair was getting ripped out, and it effortlessly held me out in front of it. The best way to compare this beast's size to my own is if you can imagine holding a large rabbit by the skin or fur of the neck out in front of you. I was the size of the rabbit next to a large man. I'm sure it must have been almost 10 feet tall, 4 to 5 feet wide at the shoulders or more. So I'm screaming and crying and swinging around helplessly, but facing away from it, or being held out in front of it by my hair and the back of the collar of my coat. She takes one slow and cautious step towards the road at first, stops, looks around, then starts moving swiftly and smoothly towards the road. Its gait and the fluidness of its motion was so foreign to me. She didn't step as much as she glided or seemed to slide each foot forward without the rest of the body moving. The next time you're walking, pay attention to how our whole body moves up and down with each step. This creature's body did not move up and down as it walked. Its legs moved independently from its upper body. It was almost like being on an escalator or one of those walking sidewalks at the airport. Do you know that feeling? Like the surrounding scenes are moving way faster than your actual steps. Like you're on roller skates when everyone else is not. I don't know, that's the best way I can describe that motion or feeling of it walking. It seemed to only take about 10 seconds, and we were back at the edge of the ditch next to the road. It took me about 5 minutes to get out there, and in trouble, struggling all the way. But it moved smoothly and quickly back to the gravel road in a matter of seconds. She/it stopped at the ditch. It looked left, then right, waited a second or two, then tossed me into the wet ditch on her left side with her right arm, while she's still facing the road. Then she turned her body to the left facing me and just looked at me. I was afraid to look at this creature's face, so I laid where she threw me in the wet swampy ditch, and I kept my arms and hands tightly wrapped over my head, only peeking out and up to her face a couple of times, wondering what it was going to do to me next. What I saw in her face was not mean, but firm, in control, confident. She was looking past me up the road, and she turned her whole body to her right and looked up the road where Dawn would be coming from. She then turned back to me, then up the road, then back to me. And this is no animal I ever heard of. It looked more like a human than a monster. It cocked its head to one side and looked straight into my eyes with a look of sadness and confusion, then of frustration. In his face I saw another person with feelings and emotions, not a flesh-ripping monster. Other than a dog, what animal has emotion in their faces and eyes? And compassion. I distinctly saw compassion in this monster's face. I look at her, then cover up and look down, then at her, then down again. I looked quickly at her face, and I saw her rocking anxiously from side to side. Then its face tensed up and grimaced, and I saw her face turn to anger. So I quickly covered my head again because I thought maybe it was going to attack me because I was looking at her. That's when I distinctly heard her say to me in my brain, not in words, "If I had let you drown, you would just bring trouble to my tribe." How to explain that? I heard her emotions like she was speaking, but it was not speech. It was an emotion, a forced emotion. Again, she turned her head and shoulders. She turned her head and shoulders together and looked up the road. That's when I just began to hear the sound of Dawn's loud car coming slowly back down the gravel road about 3/4 of a mile away. The creature turned, looked at me again, and huffed, and immediately turned around and walked back into the swamp the same way it brought me back. It walked firmly and confidently back to the swamp to the tree line, stepped up from the swamp and into the woods, and with a few more crashes and crunches of breaking branches, she was gone. Holy crap. I'll try to explain what I remember about what she looked like. What can I tell you about the face? Is that it first reminded me of a carnival bearded lady. I know how silly that sounds, but that is what she looked like to me, an 11-year-old scared shitless kid who only saw a beard on a lady at a carnival once. She really did not look like a woman, other than the breasts and the motherly emotions she was displaying. She had long, wet, dirty, tangled, dark brown hair draped in front of her eyes and nose. It was in little tendrils and easy to see through. The top layer of her hair was lighter brown in spots, sun-bleached, and was curled or hanging in thick strands like dreadlocks all around her head. The hair was matted and dirty. The hair hung off the bottoms of her arms and sides about 5 inches like an orangutan. And with a long, dirty beard and with a long, dirty beard that seemed to start under her eyes and went down and merged with the mustache and continued to flow all the way off the chin and into a beard of at least 6 inches long. And the hair was full of dried brown pine needles and twigs, bugs and clumps of mud. I'll never forget that skin. It was dark gray, sort of like a gorilla, and her hands were huge and thick with long nails that were streaked brown and black, and very dirty and chipped. Huge dark brown to black eyes, dark, deep set, without whites that I could see. The brow ridge was pronounced and made her eyes angry looking, but not angry at me. And the nose was wide and flat like a boxer or something, but not human. The nasal openings were oval slits. If I had to pick a Bigfoot type that she almost resembled, it would be the big, huge build of Patty, Patterson Gimlin film, but with much longer, messy, dirty hair. Well, that's about all I could see. The feet were big, of course, but in proportion to her legs, which were wide and covered with hair and mud. I couldn't really see much about the feet because we were standing in a swamp and her feet were squished down below the muddy waterline, so I only saw the ankles, and they were covered with mud and dirt and hair. So, Dawn pulls up a few moments later and saw me lying in a puddle in the ditch crying and yells, "Where are you, you son of a bitch? Why are you all wet and laying in the mud?" He gets out of the car and looks at me closer and yells, "Where are your damn work boots?" He takes a couple careful steps down the slope into the ditch and grabs me by my wet jacket and yanks me up out of the ditch and drags me over to the car and screams, "You stink, boy. Where have you been? You smell like you've been out sleeping with skunks." I was crying in that little spurt way, and my words were coming out one syllable at a time. I'm sobbing as I do my best to answer him, but I wasn't making any sense. I keep sobbing and stuttering, not making sense. Then he immediately gets impatient and interrupts with, "Shut up! You're not sitting in my car stinking like that." He shoves me towards the back of the car and says, "Get in the damn trunk." As he stuck his key in and opened the trunk and pointed towards it, "Get in." I was cold and wet and shaking uncontrollably, probably in shock. And my eyes were burning from the swamp scum and the stinking ammonia/skunk smell on my clothes. I tried to control my sobbing, but my teeth chattered as I cried. I slowly climbed to the dusty, dirty trunk with the spare tire and tools, and he slammed the lid down and it banged on my head. Don drove me back to the farm, as he was done many times before. I was surprised that he didn't drag me this time. He made me throw the jacket away. He couldn't get the smell out of it, and he blew it off that I somehow got tangled with a skunk, a dead skunk. And he called me stinky for a few days, but I didn't care. I didn't plan on sticking around there much longer anyways. I ran again as soon as I had another opportunity, and that time I made it all the way to the highway and got help from the Willow River Town Constable. He knew all about me, Dan, and his abuse of me. That town really pissed me off. The whole town knew about me. The teachers, the parents, but no one ever said a word. I was there just shy of a year. The constable kept me at his house for a couple of days while he made many phone calls to the county authorities where I came from, and then he drove me back to the cities, and I was not sent back. Thank God. I never told anyone about the Bigfoot who would believe me. Hell, if no one would believe me about the abuse I suffered from Dawn, with my layers of bruises and cuts, looking them in the face. You really think they're going to believe a troubled kid telling a story about a monster that pulled him out of the swamp? No way. I dealt with the never-ending nightmares about Dawn, the bloody calves and the pigs, but mostly of the monster all my life. I can still see the creature's face, looking at me with its head tilted to the side, confused and angry, and not at me, but probably wondering why I would stay where I was treated so poorly. Or maybe she was concerned and confused about the violence our species seems to inflict upon its own. And maybe it was none of those things, and she was just curious about me, like a kid with a new bug in a glass jar. Until I started searching the internet and seeing creatures and monsters, I really just thought monsters were in movies, and that all of what happened to me could never be true, or the cops, or the government would have told us, warned us, like they do about grizzlies, sharks, and alligators, right? Well, my mind had shut down and did not allow me to remember most of what happened to me as a child, abuse and torture included. It was only after I was about 22 when I stopped running from the fear of the darkness, my broken sleep, and the black hole in my memory that only showed itself in my nightmares. And I finally started to get those memories back. It was so frightening for me to have someone, something, or some place all of a sudden remind me of a trauma I suffered years earlier. I thought I was going crazy. Example is I was at the zoo in St. Paul and they have an ape exhibit. I was about 20. I'd seen apes on TV or in books, etc. But this one day I was at the zoo with my kids and I come around the corner to the cages and my brain just exploded with fear and images of the Sasquatch I saw when I was on the farm. I had such a panic attack that I couldn't function. I had to go to the emergency room. I had no idea what was happening to me. I thought maybe I was having a brain aneurysm. They said I had a panic attack and sent me home with Valium. So I began trying my best to keep those crazy, scary thoughts hidden with drugs and booze and relationships, hot rods, or traveling. None of it stopped the ever-consuming thoughts and fears that I had, wondering and fearing what I would remember next. In 46 years, I've never gone into the woods again. No camping in tents, no trail hiking, no fishing from shore, no way. She may have saved me, but it also meant there were monsters in the woods in Minnesota and lots of other places. No, the woods were and still are a frightening place for me. That's where they keep the monsters, the big freaking monsters. Those who knew me when I was about 14 know that I was the quiet, shy kid who spent all this time in the library. I was so obsessed with finding out what I encountered and what it was called, but I was constantly frustrated at not finding what I saw. At home, I was the one who was always looking into and studying the World Book, encyclopedias, 20 volumes. Always looked for answers to unasked questions. I was looking for a needle in a world of haystacks, but I didn't even know what a needle is. In those days, there was not much in our small town's library about Sasquatch. There was some conjecture about the Yeti, but that was on the other side of the world from me. And I didn't even know then what I was looking for. I was looking at monkeys and gorillas and apes and bears and the like. I did not even realize I had an encounter with the Sasquatch until I was in my 40s and found them on the internet. But even seeing the many grainy, out-of-focus pictures and videos of these damn things, as you would say, Steve, I was unsatisfied. I would not see one picture that was exactly like what grabbed me when I was a child. Sure, all were similar. A large hairy monster, not like the one I saw. Some longer hair, some with long hair, but not on the face. I spent the better part of 10 years constantly looking into and listening to encounters, podcasts, movies, etc. It's an obsession that I cannot remove from my mind. I know I had several encounters with the Sasquatch, but it was crazy to even try and get someone to listen. So I figured I would take the story to my grave. Well, almost. You know what, Steve? When I was a young guy, about 10 years old, my friend and I trapped lots of muskrats, mink, fox, etc. We loved the woods. It was all stolen from me in 5 minutes when I was 11. I'm 62 years old. In the last months of life, I have late-stage COPD. I'm on disability from the Navy. I live alone in a small town in the middle of nowhere on the vast open prairies of northern Minnesota near North Dakota. Perfect. Not a forest in sight. Steve, I only sent you my encounters. I trust that you and your listeners will believe it, or should believe it. Sasquatch are not all ruthless killers looking to kill humans. They just want to be left alone. I wrote a book a couple of years ago when I started to get very ill. Only so my 3 children would know why I've been so damn weird all my life. It includes 2 other encounters from the farm and so much more. Steve, skip the next couple of lines if you don't want to mention my book. But it's published on Amazon Kindle entitled The Agony of One Child's Weeping by Tommy C. Eugene. I, like you, Steve, give a shit if anyone believes me. But I don't tell the truth. But if I don't tell the truth of my encounters and abuses now, it'll never be known. And every time I see someone make a comment about how Sasquatches are not real and that it's all a hoax, I shake my head, feel the thin patch of hair on the back of my neck, and say to myself, frickin' ignorant idiots. Same day, long after I'm gone. Someday, long after I'm gone, hopefully the species will be acknowledged and protected, and we, the knowers, will all be silently vindicated. Steve, to get through this, thanks. Thank you. I know how valuable your time is and how little time you have for long-ass letters. By the way, I purchased your book last year as soon as it's available. It was well written and the stories are great too. Much respect to your grandfather. I'm sure he's looking down and is very proud of you. I also took your advice and purchased books from Scott Carpenter and Dave Pilatus. You're welcome to tell, reprint, forward, edit, or use this email any way you so choose. You're also welcome to include my name. P.S. I took a drive through a nice little park in the woods today and walked alone on the paths along the river. Then I came back home and wrote this to you. First time in the woods alone in 47 years. Thanks for your help, Steve. Submitted respectfully, Tommy C. Eugene, Northern Minnesota. 24/7, I don't sleep. There's your phone number. Live, love, laugh, and give thanks, Tommy. Tommy, that wasn't too long. And out of respect for you and your story, all the shit that happened to you, I think that's going to be the only one I share in this entire video. There are monsters among us and they are in human form, right? It makes me growl. It just makes me growl hearing about abusers. It makes me growl. Sometimes I wish I could just go out and clean them up. You know, like they should be cleaned up. And the amount of people that protect monsters and don't tell, so weird. So weird how we protect the bad people by knowing and not saying shit, right? Brutal. Not me, I say shit. I say shit. If I find out you're an abuser and we're in the same room or same building, you're going to know that I know. I'll guarantee you that. Anyway, I hope that encourages somebody out there. And your story encourages many, many, many out there to be brave and share the story as well. And especially if they know of a child that's being abused or they were a child being abused. On that note, back in Pemberton, where I was living for many years, we had some friends of ours whose teenage daughters were being abused by a man who was friendly amongst the crew of friends that I had. I didn't know, I might have met him once. And he just went down. He just got sentenced to 5.5 years yesterday in a jail to pay for what he did to those innocent children. He's lucky he made it out of that town alive. But apparently from, I think it's from the sheriff, who's taking him into the big city, Coquitlam, I think, where they're going to drop him off. Is basically a guarantee that he's not going to do so well where they're taking him with the rest of the people that are in there. They don't take kindly to his type, and they're throwing him to the dogs. So be it, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I'm saddened that you had that abuse in your past. Makes me happy to hear you had children. Good for you. Super happy to hear you had a family. Anyway, let's hope that your experience helps somebody and they get up the courage to get whatever they're harboring out. Get it out. Get it out to your neighbor, your friend, your spouse, here, wherever you need, wherever you can, but just get it out, right? A safe place here to share. There's a huge, massive family of people here that have your back and will fight for you, without a doubt. I know there's a lot of people here that will physically fight. I know that. Anyway, here we go. The end of the day is here. I'll be back later with more.